You know that feeling when things are, they're just fine. Your business is ticking over okay. Maybe your career's moving along, but you just have this nagging sense that it could be better, that you could be hitting something truly exceptional.
hmm We all see those big success stories, don't we? The ones that seem almost untouchable. And you wonder, what's the secret sauce? What are they doing differently?
Exactly. Well, today we're really getting stuck into a book that tackles that exact question. Jim Collins' Good to Great. We've spent some time digging through the core ideas to pull out the really crucial bits for you.
Yeah, and what's fascinating is Collins and his team, they didn't just look at successful companies. They did this really rigorous comparison.
Mm-hmm.
They looked at companies that made a sustained leap, from just good to genuinely great. And they compared them to similar companies that kind of just stayed good,
Mm-hmm.
or even mediocre. That comparison, that's where the real insights come from. It highlights what really sets the great ones apart.
Right. So our mission today isn't just to summarize the book. We want to pull out the practical stuff, the actionable ideas you can actually think about using, whether you're, running a big company or just looking to make a bigger impact in your own work.
We're focusing on those key pillars Collins identified: disciplined people, disciplined thought, and disciplined action.
Okay, let's dive in. First up, disciplined people. And that starts with this really interesting idea Collins calls level 5 leaders. What's that all about?
Well, what's interesting, I think, is how it pushes back against our typical image of a leader.
Yeah.
The charismatic, maybe larger-than-life
Or
CEO.
your star performer.
Right. But Collins found the truly great companies, the ones that made that leap, were often led by people who had this unusual combination. It was deep personal humility mixed with this incredibly strong, almost fierce professional will.
Huh. Humility and will. Seems like a paradox.
It really does. They're often modest, they tend to shift the credit away from themselves, and their main focus is the company's success, not their own ego or profile.
Collins really nailed it with his definition, didn't he? An individual who blends extreme personal humility with intense professional will. So they're not chasing personal glory.
Not at all. They give the credit to the team when things are going well. And this is key. They look in the mirror and take full responsibility when things go badly.
No finger pointing.
Zero excuses.
Yeah.
Just this relentless drive to make the organization great.
What kind of vibe does that create in a team when you have someone like that at the helm?
Oh, it's powerful. You tend to see a much stronger sense of ownership,
Yeah.
right through the team.
Yeah.
Because the leader isn't trying to hog the spotlight, it sort of empowers everyone else to step up.
Right.
It builds trust. People feel safer taking risks, maybe making mistakes even, because they know the leader isn't going to throw them under the bus.
That makes sense. So maybe a question for you listening. Think about leaders you've really admired or worked well with. Did they have that mix, that humility and that quiet determination? And how did that actually make you feel? How did it affect how you worked?
Yeah, good question.
Okay, so building on that leadership foundation, Collins then brings in this other idea that, again, feels a bit counterintuitive. He calls it first who, then what.
The bus metaphor.
Exactly. Get the right people on the bus, make sure they're in the right seats on the bus, and maybe even more importantly, get the wrong people off the bus before you even figure out where the bus is going. Why that order? Why who before what?
Well, the basic thinking is that if you have the right people, people with the right character, the right work ethic, the right innate abilities, they're actually more valuable than having a brilliant strategy run by the wrong team.
Okay.
Because the right people, they're likely to be self-motivated. They need less managing, frankly. And crucially, they can adapt if you need to change direction. They're on the bus partly because of who else is on it, not just the destination plotted out right now.
So that really flips the usual approach, doesn't it? The whole come up with a grand vision, then hire people to execute it.
Completely. Collins actually says, if you focus on the who first, it's easier to change direction later because these people are on the bus, because of who else is on the bus. If you focus on the what, then people focus on the direction the bus is going, and it becomes harder to change direction later.
So if you get the who right, figuring out the what becomes more of a collaborative journey. It just sort of emerges.
Pretty much, yeah.
Yeah.
The right people will help you figure out the best what. So, practically speaking, what does this mean for hiring, for building a team?
Well, Collins really hammers this point. Prioritize character, work ethic, integrity over specific skills, or even education.
Right. Skills can often be taught. Character, much harder.
And he says, trust your gut in hiring. If you have doubts, don't do it. Just wait.
Which is tough sometimes when you feel you need someone urgently.
Totally. But he also says act quickly to get the wrong people off the bus. Don't let poor performers or, toxic people linger, and put your absolute best people on your biggest opportunities, not just your biggest problems.
That's a great point. Don't just use your stars for firefighting.
Yeah. And it's not just individual hires, is it? It's the whole management team dynamic.
Oh, absolutely. He found these good to great companies had teams that could really argue, like vigorous debate, searching for the best answers, not just trying to win points.
But then,
But then, once a decision was made, everyone got behind it. 100%.
yeah.
No hidden agendas, no I told you so later, just unified action. Collin said, good to great management teams consist of people who debate vigorously in search of the best answers, yet who unify behind decisions, regardless of parochial interests.
That sounds like a pretty healthy, high-performing environment. That kind of debate followed by unity, it must lead to better decisions, right?
Definitely. It encourages honesty. People feel heard, even if their idea doesn't win out, so they buy into the final plan much more readily. It makes execution so much smoother. Maybe think about your own teams. Have you seen that dynamic work well, that real debate, then everyone pulling together? What happened?
Right. Okay, so we've got disciplined people, led by level 5 leaders, getting the right folks on the bus. Let's shift to the second pillar, disciplined thought. This isn't about being rigid, is it? It's more about clarity, realism.
Exactly. It's about confronting reality, but doing it in a really focused way. And the first concept here is quite powerful. It's called the Stockdale paradox, being realistic but never losing hope.
The Stockdale paradox. Okay,
Yeah.
break that down.
So it comes from Admiral Jim Stockdale, who was a prisoner of war in Vietnam for years. He noticed that the prisoners who fared worst were the optimists.
The optimists. That seems weird.
Yeah, the ones who kept saying, we'll be out by Christmas, then Christmas would come and go, we'll be out by Easter, Easter would come and go, and eventually they lost hope and died of a broken heart, basically.
Wow.
Yeah.
So what did Stockdale do differently?
He said you have to confront the brutal facts of your current reality, however grim they are. Don't pretend things are better than they are. But at the very same time, you must maintain an unwavering faith that you will prevail in the end. You have to hold both things simultaneously.
Face the brutal facts, but never lose faith in the end game. That's a tough balance.
It really is.
Yeah.
How do leaders actually do that?
Ah.
How do you lead through really tough times using that paradox?
Well, Collins gives some pointers, like lead with questions, not easy answers, encourage real dialogue and debate, don't try to coerce people, make sure people feel heard, conduct autopsies without blame, figure out what went wrong, learn from it, but don't point fingers. Build in red flag mechanisms so bad news surfaces early. And, crucially, don't give people false hope. If you face reality head on, the right people will be motivated by that challenge.
Yeah, you put it so well. On the one hand, leaders stoically accepted the brutal facts of reality. On the other hand, they maintained an unwavering faith in the endgame and a commitment to prevail as a great company despite the brutal facts. We came to call this duality the Stockdale paradox.
It really makes you think, doesn't it? When you faced really tough situations, how much were you consciously balancing that harsh reality with that underlying hope? What did that actually feel like?
That's a deep one.
Okay, the second part of disciplined thought is the hedgehog concept. Now, I'm picturing a small, spiky animal.
Yeah, it's not about being prickly, though. It's based on that old fable about the fox and the hedgehog. The fox knows lots of little things, tries lots of tricks, but the hedgehog knows one big thing, how to curl up into a ball. And it just does that one thing really well.
Okay, so the hedgehog wins. How does that apply to companies?
Collins found that the great companies simplified the complex world around them into one single organizing idea, their hedgehog concept. And it comes from understanding the intersection of three key circles, three questions, really.
Right, the 3 circles. What are they?
First, what can you be the best in the world at? And importantly, what can you not be the best at? Be honest.
Okay, best in the world. That's a high bar.
It is. Second circle, what drives your economic engine? How do you sustainably generate cash and profit? What's your key metric, like profit per customer or per store or whatever it is?
Got it. Economic engine.
And the third circle, what are you deeply passionate about? What does your organization genuinely care about? What gets people fired up?
Best in the world, economic engine, passion. And the hedgehog concept is where they all overlap.
Exactly. That sweet spot in the middle, that's your guiding principle. It simplifies everything. Collins gives the Walgreens example. Their hedgehog was basically be the best, most convenient drugstores with high profit per customer visit.
That's simple.
Deceptively simple. But he points out, that's it. That's the breakthrough strategy that Walgreens used to beat Intel, GE, Coca-Cola, and Merck. Think about that, just focusing relentlessly on that intersection.
So finding that concept isn't just wishful thinking. It needs real understanding.
Totally. You need to really grasp what you can be the best at, even if you aren't yet.
Mhm.
You need to see the path. And it has to align with how you make money and what people actually care about doing every day. That passion fuels the journey.
So for you listening again, what might your 3 circles look like? For your team, your business, maybe even your own career? Where's that potential overlap? What's the core idea?
It takes time to figure out. It's not an overnight thing.
Right. Okay, so we've covered disciplined people and disciplined thought. Now the rubber meets the road. Disciplined action. Turning all this into results.
And again, maybe not what you'd first expect. Disciplined action in these companies wasn't about rigid top-down control. It wasn't bureaucracy and endless rules.
No. What was it then?
It was more about creating a culture, a
Mhm.
framework, where those disciplined people we talked about earlier, the right people on the bus, could operate with freedom and responsibility, all aligned with that hedgehog concept.
Freedom and responsibility within a framework.
Exactly. Collins points out things like avoid bureaucracy if you can. Hire self-disciplined people who don't need managing in the traditional sense. Then you manage the system, not the people.
Okay.
Make sure people operate with freedom, but within that clear framework of the hedgehog concept. Ensure they're passionate. And this is a good one. Have a stop doing list.
A stop doing list. I like that.
Yeah. What activities, what projects, what distractions are you going to actively stop doing because they don't fit your hedgehog?
Mhm.
Avoid collaborations or ventures that are unrelated, even if they seem tempting.
Focus is key. He said, the good to great companies built a consistent system with clear constraints, but they also gave people freedom and responsibility within the framework of that system.
They hired self-disciplined people who didn't need to be managed and then managed the system, not the people.
It taps into people's motivation, right? Trust them, give them a clear goal, and let them figure out how to get there.
Within limits, obviously. Within the framework, yeah. It channels creativity and hard work effectively, prevents wasted effort.
Uh-huh.
So thinking about where you work, does the environment encourage that, or does it hinder it? Are there things you or your team could realistically stop doing to gain more focus?
Good questions. Now, in today's world, you can't talk about action without talking about technology. What was Collin's take on tech's role?
Ah, yes. Very clear finding here. For the good to great companies, technology was an accelerator of momentum, not a creator of it.
An accelerator, not a creator. Explain that.
They didn't jump on every new tech bandwagon hoping it would magically transform them. Instead, they first got clear on their hedgehog concept, started building momentum, and then they looked for technologies that could help them push that flywheel faster, help them execute their core concept even better.
So strategy first,
Yeah.
then see if tech helps execute it better.
Precisely. As Collins put it, technology is used by good to great companies as an accelerator, not a creator of growth. They avoid jumping on technology bandwagons and only pursue technology consistent with their hedgehog concept.
Yeah. It's about being strategic, not just chasing the next shiny object. What happens if you do just chase the bandwagon?
Well, you risk getting distracted, right?
Yeah.
You pour resources into things that don't actually align with what you're trying to be the best at. It pulls you off course. These companies were incredibly deliberate. Does this tech directly help us be the best, most convenient drugstore? If yes, let's look. If no, let's ignore it for now.
Makes sense. So are your tech choices really helping your core mission? Or are they maybe driven more by, hype or fear of missing out?
Worth asking.
Okay, finally, Collins uses these 2 really powerful metaphors to describe the whole process, the journey, the flywheel, and the doom loop. Can you unpack those?
Yeah, they really capture the difference in momentum, the flywheel.
Yeah.
Imagine a huge heavy metal disc, maybe mounted horizontally. Getting it started takes immense effort.
Right, the first push is agony.
Exactly. You push, and it barely moves. You push again, maybe it moves a fraction of an inch. It feels like you're getting nowhere.
Yeah.
But you keep pushing consistently in the same direction, applying all those discipline principles we've talked about.
Okay.
And slowly, gradually, it starts to turn. One full rotation, then another. And each turn gets slightly easier because momentum is building. You keep pushing, 2 turns become 4, 4 become 8.
It starts to build its own momentum.
Precisely. Eventually, it's spinning with incredible force, almost driving itself. That breakthrough, that feeling of massive momentum, comes after all that consistent, often unglamorous effort. Collin stresses there's rarely one single aha moment.
Right, he said, there is no defining aha moment which illustrates their dramatic transformation. Instead, momentum and growth is built up slowly over time, like a spinning flywheel. And no big launch parties either.
Yeah. He mentioned the good to great companies had no name for their transformations. There was no launch event, no tagline, no programmatic feel whatsoever. Sometimes the execs didn't even realize how big the shift was until they looked back. It was just consistent pushing.
Quiet, relentless progress. So what's the opposite? What's the doom loop?
The doom loop is what happens in companies that lack that discipline. They try to skip the buildup. They look for a miracle moment, a revolutionary program, maybe a big acquisition, or a dramatic restructuring, often driven by new leaders trying to make their mark fast.
They push really hard in one direction for a bit.
Yeah, but then they don't get immediate, spectacular results because flywheels don't work like that. So they get disappointed, they lose faith, and they lurch in a completely different direction. New program, new strategy, new leader maybe.
And that just kills any momentum they might have started building.
Exactly. It creates this downward spiral of disappointment, knee-jerk reactions, more changes, more disappointment, no consistency, no accumulated momentum, just a loop of frustration.
Wow, that's a stark contrast. The steady flywheel versus the chaotic doom loop. When you think about projects or big changes you've seen, can you recognize those patterns? What were the signs?
It's quite telling when you look back, isn't it?
Definitely. Okay, so let's try and bring this all together. Our deep dive into good to great. It seems the path to real sustained excellence isn't about some magic formula or finding one charismatic genius.
No, not at all. It's really a deeply disciplined process. It starts with getting the right people, led by those humble but driven level 5 leaders.
Mhm.
Then it's about thinking with clarity and brutal honesty in the Stockdale paradox, facing facts but keeping faith, and finding that sharp focus of the hedgehog concepts.
Right, knowing what you can be best at, what drives your economics, what you're passionate about.
And finally, it's about translating that into disciplined action, creating a culture of freedom and responsibility, using technology wisely as an accelerator, and consistently pushing that flywheel.
And the big takeaway for me is patience. It's not overnight. It's that slow, steady buildup of momentum, one push at a time.
Absolutely. So maybe a final thought for you to mull over. As you think about everything we've discussed, level 5 leadership, first who, then what, the Stockdale paradox, the hedgehog concept, the flywheel, which of those ideas really hits home for you right now? Which one feels most relevant to your current situation, your challenges, your goals?
Mm-hmm.
And maybe more importantly, was one small, consistent action, one small push on your own flywheel that you could commit to starting today? In your job, your career, your business. Just one thing to start building that positive momentum towards your own version of great.
That's a great question to leave people with. If this has sparked your interest, definitely check out the book itself, Jim Collin's Good to Great. It's packed with more detail and case studies.
Yeah, it's a classic for a reason. And if you want to explore related ideas, the summary we looked at also suggested a few others. Simon Sinek's Leaders Eat Last is great on building that trust and safety in teams. Collin's other big book, Built to Last, looks at companies that were visionary from the start.
Yeah.
And execution, the discipline of getting things done by Larry Bossidy, really digs into that crucial link between strategy and actually making it happen.
All sound like valuable reads, but just understanding these core principles from good to great, that feels like a really solid first step towards building something truly excellent, something that lasts.
Agreed. It's about starting that journey, making that first push.